Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Bundy, and I'm a peer support specialist at the Department of Veterans Affairs here in Pueblo, Colorado. And today I have the honor to introduce Norma Chief Farmer, who is a Navy veteran who I just got to meet today, and I'm really excited. Norma, you can look at me now. So I'm really excited to get this chance to interview you today. We got a little brief chance to speak last week. And I know that you've kind of gone through and prepared your story according to the questions that are going to be asked in the interview. So with that said, Chief, I'm excited to hear your story, and I'm sure the other folks that are out there who get the opportunity to see your video will be excited to hear your story too. So this is your chance and your opportunity. So, Chief, with that, I'm going to have you go ahead and go on in, and if I find a spot to jump in and ask you a couple questions, I will.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Well, one of the first questions that came up is about my prior history prior to ever joining the Navy. And I'll have to say I was born and raised in Santa Cruz, California. My parents were from Arkansas, and they met in California, and that's where everything started. During my time there, I was the firstborn of four. I had a typical childhood. My mom was very strict, and I had to follow a lot of rules. She wanted me to be a perfectionist, which I became, which is also a downside sometimes. But then again, it was also good. But my mom was mostly the breadwinner. My dad was a redhead and had a redheaded temper. And that I had that for years. In some of my old pictures, you'll notice I was a redhead. And this past January, I decided to go all natural. So with that, when I turned 18, I graduated from high school and decided that I'd be a spinster if I didn't get married.
So was that in Santa Cruz?
That was in Santa Cruz,
so
yes.
You were born and raised there in
Yes, I
Santa
was.
Cruz.
And I lived in Capitola Beach, about 2 blocks from the beach. And the house we bought for $19,500 at 6% interest in 1969. And then I went to see it here back when, 10 years ago, and it was going for $750,000 because the beach got closer to the house because of corrosion and taking away the whole side of the mountain.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
So, and the house was not really that much to talk about, but it was home for many, many years to us. So I did get married at 18, and by the time I was 24, I had 3 boys. And I was married for 12 years and divorced. And then I was drinking and doing cocaine a lot. I had to get out of California. It was 1983, so I joined the Navy. And the reason for the Navy was because I went to the Air Force first, and they said, "Have you ever done drugs?" And I said, "Gosh, I think I smoked pot when I was 18." And they're like, "Go away." I'm like, "Really?" So I walked right next door to the Navy, and they said, "Have you ever done drugs?" I said, "What's that?" Never done it in my life, lied like a fool to get in. So, and then the questions too were asking me, but the line about the drugs in the Navy, that's going to be a later story you'll hear about as well, because it did come to fruition and come out in the open. And so go ahead.
So some of your motivation to get into the service was
to leave California,
to get out of the environment, and
yeah.
And the Air Force said, "Nah, no, thank you." But the Navy was like, "Oh yeah, cool, we'll take you."
Because I didn't admit to anything.
Okay.
And that was what got me in.
Okay.
I was 30 years old when I joined the Navy.
You were 30 when you joined the Navy?
When I joined the Navy.
Okay.
And had 3 boys.
Okay.
I served in the Persian Gulf conflict, the Iraqi freedom, enduring Iraqi freedom from 1991 to 1999. So that's basically the outline of my history. But I'd like to go back to being a 30-year-old in boot camp. That was one of the most terrifying events in my life. I had just cleaned up January 1st, 1984, never touched cocaine ever since. I've never had any drugs ever since. But again, the military kept me clean. The military gave me a purpose in life. And so I continued with my career. I decided to make a difference in my life by joining the Navy because I knew if I stayed there much longer, I would be dead. I was sleeping in cars, on stairways, under bridges, wherever I could, because I was a mess. I was falling apart. I had to give up my 3 biological boys when I went into boot camp. So I gave them up temporarily to my ex, and I did have paperwork for that. And the Navy said, okay, I could go in. I didn't have to do permanent like you do today. Today to go in, you have to do permanent. So after boot camp, I went ahead and took possession of my children again, paperwork-wise. And all the money I got while I was in boot camp went to my sister. She paid my bills, got me out of debt, so nobody would come after me while I was in boot camp in A school, because I thought for sure somebody was going to come. So after all this, I knew it would be a challenge because I didn't really have the support of my family. I had to use my family too much and my friends. And so this was my chance to do something for me, and I knew it was going to be difficult. I went into the delayed entry program, and I was supposed to go in February 14th of 1994 on Valentine's Day. And as I learned, the military can change their mind anytime they want. And the 26th of February, they called and asked me if I could come into boot camp. The 24th, if I could come into boot camp in 2 days. And I'm like, sure, you know? So I had 2 days to get my act together. So I got on the airplane after the MEP station, and I left there and I went to Orlando, Florida. That's where I got to go to boot camp. You know, it was a beautiful state to be in, nice and warm, and got up to be 90 degrees at it sometimes, you know, and that was really...
What time of year did you go?
January.
January, and it was just beautiful and gorgeous.
Oh yeah, but it got to be 90 degrees in many days, and many monsoon days of just pouring down rain. So while I was in boot camp, we got on the bus after the airport. We couldn't talk to each other. Nobody knew each other. We got to, finally got into Orlando, Florida. When we arrived, we had to do a urinalysis test right away before we could go to sleep because it was late at night. Well, being a woman of 30, having 3 children, I could care less who saw me. I was able to give them that urinalysis in a heartbeat, and I went to my rack. And next morning, there were still some young 18, 19-year-olds just suffering in pain because they couldn't go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And because of that, their bladders are ready to explode. They just had an adverse reaction of anybody watching them. From there, let me see. What I didn't say is that I decided to get out of California. I wanted to be in Air Force. Not Air Force, but I wanted to work on the planes, what is it called? Air traffic controller, there you go. And that was a year wait. Well, I had to get out now, so I took hull tech. Hull technician, welder and firefighter. Didn't know anything about either one of them. So I took that, and when I went to boot camp, the company commanders just gave me the hardest time. I was a woman in the military. I was old to them. I was going into a male field, and they just thought I would never make it in life. So continuing with boot camp, I have to get to my notes real quick as I continue with boot camp. I'm going to go down again. The next morning, the very first morning there, the company commanders woke us up really early, took us to chow. None of us knew what we were doing. We didn't know our right from our left. And after you get out, you learn not to know it again. So just to let you know that, you still forget. But they wanted 82 women in this boot camp. So for 2 weeks, we waited until we got 82 women.
Oh, like in a holdover area as you were just waiting to start. Okay.
And during the holdover time, all we did was clean, go to chow, do marching, go smoke in the lounge. And this was just a holding area. Once we got our 82 girls, we went into our barracks. And of course, I, for some reason, became the mom. I wonder why. And then we lost 2 girls. One was pregnant and one failed the urinalysis. So we lost those 2 girls. So we had 80 of us. So they decided the first thing they were going to do was make me the company commander. And I was to march everybody to and from. And I'm like, that was not my cup of tea. And so I failed that. Then they made me the master at arms for in-house. Well, that was right up my alley because that's cleaning everything, and I was a perfectionist, and I could do this. And as we went through the process, we realized that a lot of the girls had different skills. And when I realized that they had different skills to give to the company, that's what they did. We kept them. Boots did over here, clothing over here. I did haircuts in the behind closed doors. Nobody wanted to get their hair cut by the butcher anymore. And I don't know if it's okay to say, but if you look at this picture, I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it? Okay, that's me and my 3 boys right before I went into boot camp.
A little closer.
Yeah. So I got my hair cut really, really short. I was not going to let them do anything. And the other girls were told by their recruiters that they could keep their long hair as long as they kept it up. Just recently, I was at an airport and saw girls from the boot camp from the Air Force. And I go, where aren't their hair up? And why isn't it, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And so finally, instead of being the chief and saying something mean, I went up to the girls and I said, can I ask you a question? I was in the Navy and retired. And when I went, I had to have my hair cut really, really short. Oh, you won't believe this, she said. She was so excited, bouncing around and jumping, and says, we get to wear our hair down to at least to the wing on the back of your shoulder. And I'm like, really? Things have changed a lot since I was in boot camp.
Did it make you mad?
No, it didn't make me mad. It just showed the changes, and I liked them. But again, I know what it's like being aboard ship and having to put a face mask on and having to go into a fire. And when you have all that hair, that is not the easiest thing to do. And what really, and I'm going to say this, I am not a prejudiced person. In fact, you'll find out that I adopted 2 African-American girls. But when I was on board ship and they allowed braids for African-American women, several braids, those braids were synthetic hair. It scared me to death to think of them going into a fire.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's going to melt right on their head. And they had no idea, really, the consequences. Just I'll drop it from there. Okay. The second thing on the agenda, we talked about the haircuts. The third on the agenda was our uniforms. Nobody cared about how we got our uniforms. We just got the uniforms. If they didn't fit, lose weight, get into them. This all went on for quite a while. And then what happened is during boot camp, every time I got fired from one position to another, I started out up here and I was down here as a section leader. We'd go to chow, we'd come back, and all of the lockers would be turned over with whatever group I was in charge of. I'm like, I knew they were perfect. Why did they do this to me? And they were trying to break me. They could break me physically, but they were not going to break me spiritually. I was bound and determined to never let that happen. I went to so many different extra training exercises, but every time I got in trouble for something that I didn't even know I was in trouble for, I got cycled and I did 30 push-ups. At that time, women were allowed to do push-ups on their knees. Well, our company commander says, no. So we learned to do push-ups with male push-ups. 30 years old, never an exercise buff. That was very difficult, but I managed to do it. And I managed to keep doing it the whole time I was there. I was in boot camp for 13 weeks of a 10-week boot camp.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, so they really were giving it to you.
They were giving it to me.
Yep.
5 weeks into boot camp, I realized I hadn't had a bowel movement. I hadn't had a menstrual cycle. And I was like, oh my God, what's going on? So I went to medical a couple of times. And they would give me this little teeny tiny red pill and say it was a stool softener. Well, it did nothing but irritate me and make me angry. So I wrote my mom. I said, Mom, I need some laxatives. I needed to go to the bathroom, I didn't know what else to do, and nobody was really helping me in boot camp. And so, and I said, but when you send me the box, send me a whole bunch of chocolate candy bars and a whole bunch of cookies. And she did. So while I was opening it up, the company commanders were looking at it and telling me how fat I was. Well, don't have go crap for 5 weeks. You're going to get fat, So anyway, she company commanders took all my candy bars and all my cookies and told me how fat I was. In the meantime, I snuck out the X-Lax. So I took 6 that night. And I'm telling you this because of a purpose, and the purpose will be followed up later. But I took 6, and I was able to go before sunrise. And so every night I'd take a half a bite of a laxative. And I was finally able to go and to keep myself cleansed so I could be more motivated and have more energy to do things. This continued all through my, on and off through my military career. So on the 6th week of boot camp, we got our dress uniforms, and I was a master at arms, and we had to go through all of the uniforms and pull up all the gear adrift. Well, they informed me when they came in to do the inspection, they cycled my team and I, and they said every time they looked in a pocket, they found gear adrift. They're little tiny tags that they put into your uniforms.
Say it again. It's a what?
They called it gear adrift because
Gear
it was,
adrift. Okay, gear adrift.
because it was inside the pockets and stuff, and it wasn't supposed to be there. And I had a team of 5 people working with me, and I'm like, we know we did that. I'm a perfectionist. I know it's right. No, it wasn't right. Every time they pulled out one, I said, okay. She had it in her hand, I'm sure, when she put it in there. But so with that, I became the section leader from that point on. And then when I was a master at arms, I used to get up in the middle of the night. There was this one girl that peed the bed every night. Actually, there's 2 of them. And I would get up in the middle of the night, and I would go wake them up. They'd already wet. We change their sheets, clean everything, put them back on the rack before the company commanders found out.
Wow.
Because if they found out, they would have been sent back home.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's protecting your teammate. You know, it's something they had to grow out of. The stress and everything people go through in boot camp or even in life, things happen. My adopted daughter at 13 didn't stop wetting until she was 19. And so it's like, it's not her fault. And so that's what I look at. There's something else going on. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that, but I'm not giving names. Well, I was cycling, it was 25 push-ups because I was invited to a lounge party. I'm cutting myself off here. Okay. I went back to the barracks. What happened is they told me that I was going to be set back a week is what it was because I failed the inspection. So they sent me back to a week, and my name of my company was K039. And when they sent me back a week, that company was K040. And in the military, 40 is 40, perfect. And I was informed by them that I was going to be perfect, and they were going to make sure of it, and that I was going to graduate. So they invited me to the lounge party, and I get in there, and we start running around in circles, jumping up and down for an hour. And I thought this was going to be a party. I had no idea I was being invited to exercise. And I asked a question. I said, what did I do wrong? Well, I got cycled 25 push-ups right away. So after that happened, this time I was invited to indoor tennis for some reason. Oh, I know what it was. Is because when I went back to another company, when it came time to do all the uniforms again, they left me with the master at arms, and I was going to make sure it wasn't going to happen to her what happened to me. Well, my suggestions and what I did helping her, I got in trouble for. So I was sent to IT. IT is called indoor tennis. IT is also intensive training. So we were only allowed tennis shoes, no belts, and a watch cap. And we went to the IT and got there, and it was working out for an hour constantly, push-ups, sit-ups, crunches, whatever you wanted. And that was because I got in trouble with the master at arms.
This is still in basic?
This is basic.
Dang, Chief.
It goes faster after that.
Wow.
So,
goodness.
Yep.
They razzed you the whole time.
10 days before graduation, we were allowed to have a picnic with our brother company. Well, I met our brother company, the master at arms of that company, and he and I just fell head over heels over each other. But during that time, I had a little bodysuit on with shorts, and I had taken the straps down. And I watched these little girls, 18, 19-year-olds, rolling around, tucking their shirts under their bra, pulling their shorts down, rolling them down into their pants, taking their dog tags and wrapping them around their waist. And it's like, oh my gosh, no, I just showed my shoulders. Well, that was when we had that picnic. And then that following Saturday, I signed up for SeaWorld. The man in the brother company and I, he was older too. We were going to meet up. Didn't happen until later that night. We met up for some very much needed R&R. And then on the way back, I broke quite a few rules. I was smoking in uniform, running in high heels, and carrying a bag that didn't match my uniform, trying to get in before 2300. I got in at 2302, and the watch said, "You're late." And I said, "No, I'm not." I handed him this bag, candy. Oh, candy helps every time. He wrote me down for 2300. So I got in on time. The following day was Sunday. I went to worship to get away from the company commanders. 3 days before graduation, the company commanders told me I was going to go to Mini Mo.
I haven't heard of this.
Yeah, Mini Mo. And I'm like, 3 days before. They're telling me. I said, okay. And I went the day before graduation, I went to Mini Mo. Mini Mo is working out with your rifles. It was 2 hours long. I had no idea how long I was there until it was over with. And this is a very emotional part for me because while we were, we had to watch a video, and the video explained everything that we had to do and what was expected of us. And I just looked at it going, I am never going to make it out of here. And then this Marine said, "Who's the 30-year-old?" And I raised my hand up to all the people staring at me and sneering and making remarks. And we all went outside. That's when it was 90 degrees. And we worked out. I never quit. I never quit. As the last set was coming up, I was ready to pass out. My legs were swollen. Yeah. I couldn't get my knees raised high enough to march. And they were swollen really bad. So we got down to do push-ups again. Thank God I learned the male push-ups, right? And so my rifle's in front of me, put my hands on my rifle, and I'm doing the male push-ups. After about 35, I was ready to drop. Mm-hmm. And this Marine got down in my face and he says, "Don't you quit on me, Carson." And he kept screaming it at me. And today, I appreciate it. He was bound to determine that I was going to pass. And when we went back to the video room, he said, they said everybody passed but these two people. And I was one of them, and so was another young man. And what happened is they took the young man in first, and boy, did they rip him a new one while he was in there. And it's because he always had a smirk on his face, and he had a really bad attitude while he was working out. He was very physically fit. And me, they said, "Carson," when I went in, they said, "Carson, you passed. You didn't do the best of it, but you passed. You never gave up." And that's when I lost it. 13 weeks in boot camp, and I was going to make it.
Wow.
That's why I went back to boot camp, because being a 30-year-old woman in the military and going into a man's world, not doing the typical stereotype of filing and paperwork and medical.
Yeah.
I was harassed a lot. But I made it. That was the key. Sorry. I'm going to get a Kleenex. Here it is.
You're okay. Yeah. You can have a drink of water and everything.
That's okay. Okay. Now I think I got the tears under control till next time. Okay.
Thank you for sharing that. Your basic training story is one of lots and lots of challenges.
Yes.
And you made it through it. You made it through it. I'm glad the Marine was there to help you through.
And so am I, because without him being in my face, I don't know if I would have. But then I had another Marine later on that did the same thing in a different way. When I left Philadelphia the next day after graduation, young king, I flew to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and where I went to HTA school. My first introduction there going to school was cattle car. They loaded us all up in cattle cars and took us to school. And we came home in cattle cars. I was really shocked. Is this the best the Navy can do? And most of the meals they served us was rabbit. I thought it was chicken, but then I found out later it was rabbit.
Rabbit?
Rabbit. So I went through everything with, I learned the weld really good. I had a steady hand, plus being a perfectionist was good. I did welding and TIGging and MIGging. I used a plasma cutter for cutting. Then we went into the damage control venue, and I learned damage control. I found it difficult at first, but then it really became my cup of tea later in life. I really enjoyed damage control. And
What is damage control?
Firefighting.
Okay.
It's firefighting. It's also, let's say you get a hole in the side of a ship.
You know, patch that sucker.
Be able to patch that sucker, whether it be with a dead body or a mattress or stuffing your clothes in there. You patch that hole.
Okay.
So I learned how to do all of that, and it was pretty interesting. When I was in A school, I met husband number 2. And when I got out of A school, he came with me to California to meet my family. I actually went there to see the family, but I also went there to see to get my kids. I wanted to get my kids, and I wanted to start with them in my new life. I was getting ready to go to Charleston, South Carolina. And at the time, the judge said, get married, get a house, get your kids. I'm like, really? Well, in the end, I got my oldest son. My ex got to keep the 2 younger ones, and with his girlfriend. He didn't have to get married, get a house, and get his kid, but I did. So that was difficult, but I did get the oldest one. I do want to jump back to when I was in A school. I tended to drink quite regularly and party. And one night, I decided to go out alone. And because I was alone, I was not going to be drinking. I knew that right away. When I came to the next morning, I was in the back of a camper, of a pickup. I don't know who it belonged to. I don't know how I got there. And my underwear was in my purse. I just kind of let it go. But I knew something had happened. I don't remember anything. It was later at another command I found out a lot more information than I wanted to know. So in July, when I finished A school and they told me to get married, get a house, get a kid, I married my second husband in September of that year. My first duty station at SEMA Charleston, I was doing really well working in the field. They got wind that I was a records clerk at one time in my previous life, that I could drive school buses, that I could drive trucks, that I could do a lot of different things, but they wanted me to take over their filing system and organize their whole first lieutenant's office. I did that, and I did it quite well. Usually whatever I try to do, I'm very good at, and I persevere. I don't give up. I said, I've never failed at anything in my life. I have made choices. That's the way I always looked at life. I made choices, good or bad, but I made them. So I became the first lieutenant's personal secretary. They saw what I was capable of, and I made E4 right away. And I tell you, they wanted me to do so much above my pay grade. And people listened to me because I was an older, mature woman.
Because of your age.
Right.
Yep.
Had nothing to do with my rank, but my age. Absolutely. Yep. And so then all of a sudden, the drug and alcohol abuse counseling came open. I was so excited. I wanted to become a drug and alcohol abuse counselor in the Navy.
Okay.
I wanted to be a master of something. And so I went for the interview, went through the whole process, and they were taking E4s at the time. And went through the process, and after everything was over with, the counselor said, we're not going to accept you. And I said, why? Because you're hiding something. Well, I was.
Yeah.
Oh, I was. Absolutely. So I decided to come forward, and I went to my command and I came forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I was being processed out for fraudulent enlistment. And I was devastated. And I came in to sign the paperwork in the CO's office to see a secretary, and the CO came up. And my name at the time was Carson Hobbs. And he said, Carson Hobbs, get in here. Oh, I'm scared to death. Yes, sir. He goes, I just signed some paperwork for Carson Hobbs, and you're the only one I know. I said, yes, sir. I mean, I'm panicking, like, sitting here,
Sure.
shaking E4,
Yeah.
CEO. And he said, tell me why. And I said, sir, before I joined the military, I lied to come in so I could get in. And I said, I'm a drug addict. I was addicted to cocaine. And I said, and if I told anybody, I would never make it. So I didn't say anything. So I could be the drug addict dead on the streets right now, or the woman you see before you now. And he gave me the biggest hug and said, I like the woman I see today.
Wow.
And I said, he's recovering. And only recovering personnel understand when another recovering personnel. And then 2 days later, he made me the assistant to our drug and alcohol person on command. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the faith he had in me was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So because I married a sailor, I was going to my next command, which was AFDL 6. That's Auxiliary Floating Dry Dock Little. And I went to that dry dock, and my husband at the time was the second one. And he was stationed down in Charleston, in South Carolina at the time, and I went up to SEMA Charleston. I was at SEMA Charleston. And SEMA is short intermediate maintenance activity for those who don't know.
Thank you for explaining those. I appreciate it.
And so that was my first command. But then when I left there, that was when I worked for the first lieutenant, never in my rate. I went to the AFDL 6 in Little Creek Base in Norfolk, Virginia. Little Creek Base is a smaller base than the big Norfolk Naval Base.
Okay.
And so I worked there. And then as I was working and doing my job, I was at E5, second class petty officer, and they were looking for a dock master for the dry dock. They had lost theirs, and no one would come up within my ranks. And I was E5, I was actually a junior personnel there. And so they decided to go ahead, and they said, well, we're going to have to go, find someone. I said, I'd like the job. Really? Yeah. So they sent me over to AFDM 7. That's Auxiliary Floating Dry Dock Middle in Norfolk, Virginia. And of course, the L's are the large ones.
Okay.
You got medium and little. I got little, medium, and something else. It's not large, it's something else. I can't remember. But so I went over there, and you had an officer who was the dock master, and you had him barking orders to chiefs who were barking orders to everybody else, and they were docking this vessel. And I said, okay, I can do this, I think. The first couple of times I tried to take the dry dock and sink it down to bring the water in so the ship could come in, and then it got set on the blocks, and the blocks are all certain sizes. Every ship's hull is different. And you have to know how to read blueprints. I didn't know how, but I learned.
Oh, wow.
I even made a scale of our dry dock, a 1/4-inch scale, so I could do everything right there in front of me without having to go out and do a lot of work.
Wow.
And I've never been good at math, but I did outstanding. But the first couple of times I was trying to practice, I got a list so bad.
Okay.
Thank God there was nothing in dock. But and I ran out crying. And the chief that was there yelled and screamed at me, get your butt back in there and fix this. Well, he pushed me in there, and I fixed it.
Yeah.
And I never had another mistake like that again. So I was at the dry dock for 3 years. And like I said, I think I was very good at it.
Cool.
Right before I got ready to leave, about 6 months before I got ready to transfer, they wanted me to be the LPO of the division. It was only 6 personnel, 6 or 7. And I begged them to send me to Leadership Management Education and Training School, LMET. And they said no one was there to replace me. And I'm going, that's not fair. I should be able to go.
Right.
So I kept begging, and they finally gave in and let me go. And when I went there, I was interviewed. And All Hands Magazine, 1989. Can you see it? Yeah. It's all about me in here, going to LMET school, learning to lead. But it will say Hobbs, because my last name was Carson Hobbs from the second husband. And so it's all the way through here. You'll find out, I don't want to read it all to anybody, but it tells you everything that we went through, the problems we had. And one thing, when they asked me at one time, they, wanted to know Without the tools that I got from LMET, I don't think I would have lasted this long in a leadership position. About a month after finishing the LPO course, it doesn't work up the chain of command as well as it works downward. However, if the higher echelon would go to LMET, also it would be helpful.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
you called him out.
Yeah. I told you I'm very outspoken. I'm a very when I realized what you had to do to play the games in the military.
Yeah.
I was one of their best players, and I was one of the ones that I took care of my people. I took care of them because there was nobody else that was going to do it. And I got tired of waiting on officers to come down and tell me I could let my people go. And it's like, we were supposed to leave 30 minutes ago, and where were you? On the smoke deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, I let them go. What do you want done? Well, you're going to do it? And I said, well, if you got something, I'll do it.
Yep.
But I let my people go. There was no point in them staying around if there wasn't anything else going on. So once I got through all my training, I was supposed to leave, and I went to LMET school, loved it. After that, I was due to leave for Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, in May of '89 to attend law enforcement school because I was headed off to Cuba. Could not wait to go to Cuba. Let's see. What happened, though, is we had to dock 6. What were they called? It's in my notes again because I always forget. They were 6 tugboats. Yes.
Okay.
And tugboats have one of the most unstable bottoms you'd ever know on any vessel, other than an FFG. FFGs are very unstable as well. So 6 tugboats. And one of the tugboats, the last one I was to dock, was number 666, which fell over and docked a few years before I came on board.
What?
Yes. So they wouldn't let me leave when I was supposed to leave. So I stayed an extra 2 months and docked those 6 ships. And when it came time to dock 666, I had planned, we're showing that baby up. So once we could get down to the water, to the basin of the dry dock, and most of the water had gone out, we went down with 4x4s, and we were showing the ship up from the sides of the ship to the inside bulkheads of the dry dock. That puppy was not falling over on my watch. And after I got done with that, they let me leave.
Oh.
And I went to school a couple of months late, but they were starting up anyway.
Yeah.
And school in Texas was, I think it was like 6 weeks long. But one thing I wanted to say too is early in my career, I learned how to work smarter, not harder. That was one thing you have to learn. Law enforcement school was boring at times, frustrating, and very difficult for me to get through the physical course. So when it got ready, time to go through the physical portion of it and climb through stuff, go over walls, crawl on your belly with your arms and legs, go underneath, what was it? That wire.
Yeah, barbed wire
fencing, and you had to go underneath it. And because I had the rifle, I had to hold it up.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew I wasn't going to make it over the wall. I knew I wasn't going to make it in a lot of places. And so we had Air Force, Marine, Navy, Army, everybody at the school.
Okay.
So I just stood up and said, I want the biggest, baddest Marine out there. And this big, tall country boy came up to me and he said, I'll be your partner, ma'am. And I said, great. I'm telling you, this young man hurled me over walls, pushed me through obstacles, encouraged me, dragged me towards the finish line. And once we started to ascend the final hill, I got my second wind, and we just looked at each other and said, let's go. And we just started hurling ourselves over the mountains, screaming and waving our weapons. And I mean, what a glorious time. It was so wonderful. So that's the second time a Marine helped me. It was awesome. I've never given up pushing and pulling me until the very end. That's what he did.
Cool.
I had so much fun with this guy. He was awesome. He just took care of me, and he never gave up pushing and pulling me until the very end.
It's cool.
I was excited. I mentioned, or I might have said once before, we had weapons training in the PR-24, which is a baton. And these batons are used to take people down. The police department has one, but it's just a single one-piece baton. The ones we had actually had a handle on it. And when you twirled it around, you threw it and did things with it, you could cause a lot of damage to someone. The Marine I was practicing with, I told him it was a different Marine. I said, if you don't hurt me, they're going to fail you. So eventually he gave me the bruises and pain that I needed for him to graduate. I became an expert on an M16. I became a sharpshooter on the 45. And then, so I made it through this challenge, this physical challenge, and I was off to Cuba. I ended up divorcing husband number 2 back in 88, and then in 89, I married husband number 3. It was a real quick wedding at the house, specifically so he could go to Cuba with me. Once I was assigned to the Cuba, I was on the leeward side of the island, which is 4 miles, and on the mainstay of the island is 14 miles. When you first get there, you get to go see everything, and you get to go on tours. Well, after I toured the 4-mile side, then they took me over to the 14-mile side. We're not allowed to carry a weapon the first couple of weeks we're there, and the reason why you'll see. So as we're going through bunkers and going through housing and checking things out and making sure everything is safe, and they're teaching me all the ropes, they were explaining to me, they were my team members from Windward side, and they were explaining to me about these buildings that were vacated and run down. And they go, sometimes when we go there, we can catch some of the teenagers doing things they shouldn't. I'm like, okay, I'm on the edge of my seat waiting, just waiting and waiting to go around. So we're going around the whole place and we're going around the buildings and they're at the lights off. It's really quiet. And I'm leaning my head out the window trying to check everything. And all of a sudden, this masked man jumped up and scared the living daylights out of me. I really think I pissed my pants. I'm not sure. But I do know I was scared to death and I was looking for my gun. And thank God I didn't have it.
Mm.
He was wearing a clown mask, and my parents had clowns at their house, pictures, and they always scared me as a little kid. So that was I don't know how they knew that was one of the worst things they could have done to me. Well, then after I went through all of that, then I was sent back to Leeward. Well, NCIS had better plans for me. They nabbed me up from Leeward, took me over to Mainstay, and I would go to Mainstay Island, which is the windward side, every weekend. And my job was to go into the clubs and hook up all the military for whatever they wanted. Now, mind you, men were the only ones on ships at the time. They were the only ones allowed on ships. Women were not. So it was all men. And so I was a single woman, looked like a local there to them, because I wore civilian clothes. And when they wanted drugs or whatever, I'd hook them up. And then I'd go back in the club and start all over again. Well, after 6 months, the locals get to know you really well, and some of the guys figure you out too. So the NCIS can't use me anymore. So then I went back to Leeward to do law enforcement. Well, then they had another change. Again, military changing their mind. I no longer was going to be a patrol officer. I was going to be working investigations, which means I got to let my hair grow long and I got to wear civilian clothes all the time.
Mm.
Yes. And so I learned how to scuba dive while I was there.
Oh, cool.
It took me a long time because I don't like the water, believe it or not. But I learned how to scuba dive and I enjoyed it so much. And while I was in Cuba at law enforcement, that's when I met one of my best friends in the world. And he still is today. And I'm going to say his name. His name is Scott. Scott and I became so close. We are still friends today.
Cool.
And this was back in 1989. So we are still friends today. Scott and I learned, we scuba dived together all the time because my ex was too busy doing something else, because I did divorce that guy too. Yes. And so we worked together in investigations, and every time there was anything like interrogations that had to be done, he would have me interrogate the women. Because when they cried, it didn't faze me.
Mm-hmm.
When they cried with him, he was like, "Oh, I don't know what to do with her," So I did all of that, but we were a team. We worked opposite shifts, and even when he went on his shift, I would go with him. When I would have mine, he'd go with me. I turned my back on a person of domestic violence one time. I had a 38 in my purse at the time, And I turned my back on her, and she jumped on top of me because we were cuffing her husband. And I'm like, ah, I learned never to do that again. But yeah, so, and then another time I had my M16 and we were guarding a truck loaded with cocaine. We had busted a boat. Our shore patrol had busted a boat. We had to unload it from the boat into the truck, and then the truck came to our side of the station because it was going to be taken off by the DEA by plane. So it was on our side.
Okay.
And we had to guard this besides carrying it. So we had to have all that information put in our medical record that we had touched this. And I thought, and what did I tell you my drug of choice was when I first started?
Exactly.
But 6 years had lapsed. And it didn't faze me. I was more worried about the guys coming to get it than my using it.
Wow.
I never thought about using it. So, but it was all under lock and key, and we did that. So, I mean, Cuba was fun. While I was there, I decided to go for my aviation warfare pen. And that was a trick. I was a black shoe going for a brown shoe pen. Black shoe Navy.
Oh.
And then the brown shoe Navy.
I get it.
That's what they called it.
So like blue collar, white collar kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. Black shoe, you're all shiny and polished.
And so I went through the classes, did everything I was supposed to do, and I went to go before my board, and they kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And 2 days before I was to fly out, 3 days, they gave me my board at like 3 p.m. They asked me what an LPD does. What does it stand for? Or FFG? Or what does all of these acronyms stand for? And what is their job? And I said, I don't know. And they're going, what? And I said, well, I was told when I went through class that I didn't have to know. As a brown shoe, you don't have to know. And they said, yeah, as a brown shoe, you don't have to know, but you're a black shoe. You need to know this stuff.
Mm.
So they gave me a day. Well, I only had 2 and I was leaving the island. So I went ahead and went home and I crammed and crammed and crammed. And I got back the next day at 3 p.m, and I passed. Well, the Master Chief was there. And so nobody had a pen to pen me. But they gave me a certificate and say I passed. And I go, where's my aviation pen?
What?
Yeah, it was pretty sad. So the next day I'm getting ready to fly out and the Master Chief sees me, the Command Master Chief. And he comes over and he goes, did they give you a pen? I said, no. He took his pen off and he penned me.
Wow.
I was happy.
Wow.
Now, I left without my third husband because he had gotten a job with the government. If you work for the government at that time for a year overseas, you can come back to the States and get plugged right in without having to go through all of the BS.
Mm.
So he stayed an extra couple of months with some friends and then came and joined me. When he came, I was gone. I was going to a school again. Next stop was CBRD school. It's Chemical, Biological, Radiological Defense. And I went to that school, and while I was there, this was a high-intensity school. By the time I left, I knew without a doubt that the equipment and testing gear we used in the Navy would work. I was the only female assigned to FTG Norfolk.
Mm.
Because I didn't have shipboard experience, and I was coming from all these shore duties to this command, which is an aviation warfare pen, as an E6. I have to say this, go back to Cuba. They split hull tech and damage control. They were no longer joined. There was the HTs and the DCs, and I went to the DC side and made E6 right away while I was in Cuba.
Okay.
So I was an E6, a petty officer first class, and like I said, I was the only female assigned to FTG Norfolk. And because of no shipboard experience, they sent me out to sea with the ship for 2 weeks. The ship was running drills. They were doing so much, they didn't even have time to give me. So I just I got to go. I got to get out of here.
So you just had to go spend 2 weeks on the ship.
Yeah. So what I learned in the upcoming months was all on board ship while I was inspecting and training them. Okay. That's when I learned stuff. I knew my equipment and I knew how to facilitate and teach. Within 6 months of being assigned to the CBRD team, our command was incorporated with MTT. MTT was a mobile team trainer. There was 5 of us. I was the first female ever assigned to a mobile training team, and I was the only female in that group.
What year is this?
1991.
91. Okay.
Women still were not allowed to go on ships.
Yep.
So during that time frame, my job consisted of landing on aircraft carriers, catapulting off, lowered by helicopter, and taking a motor wellboat ride in 12-foot seas. That was interesting, because when it was time to get on the ladder to run like heck up the side of the ship, that your motor wellboat would come up and you had to grab the ladder rung and go. And I was wearing a K-pock, and my K-pock had broken open. The dye was broken open. So I had this green dye all over me. And I had a brand new perm in my hair, really short hair. They were just frizzy all over from all of the salt water. And it was in the time of tailhook. And there was so much going on about tailhook, and the ship knew a woman was coming, but they couldn't tell who was a woman and who wasn't in the boat,
Okay.
the wellboat. So when I got at the top, this guy grabbed me, the boatsman grabbed me, went like this to bring me on board. And when he did, I said, "Don't you drop me, you SOB." And he dropped me right on top of all of the lines and ropes that were there. I got so many bruises on my legs from that. But he was scared because he heard a woman's voice. It was a very lonely time for me because they stayed away from me. People stayed away because I was a female.
Yep.
So with that in mind, and all this I was doing, we had physical training with the command that I was with constantly. And everything I did, I had to do the men's sports. I was never allowed to just go work out at the gym and do my own thing. I always had to do the men's sports. I was expected to participate in all activities with the men, whether it be training, lunch, or having a beer. To be a female sailor in a man's world was to act like a man and cuss like a man. And I did it very well. One day, my senior chief at this command walked by. We had rows of desks on each side. And he walked down the middle of the aisle, and he walked by every desk, all 5 on each side, and got to me. I was kind of oddball, and threw a stack of paperwork on my desk and told me to file them. And then he walked back to his desk. Now, he had to walk by every one of those men to do that. And I'm like, I am not going to be somebody's secretary again. I'm going to do my job. Picked up the paperwork, took a chance, took it back, put it on his desk, and said, "File it yourself." I was sent to sea for about 2.5, 3 weeks straight. I never got to see land for a long time.
Wow.
So my job was to train in CBRD and prepare the men for battle in the Persian Gulf. The training was fun. I liked it. I had a great time with it. And I have to tell you this. I got in trouble for this one. I really did. I had an officer that was in the training. We were in the well decks of an dock landing ship, which is where the Marines come off and the vehicles roll off, and we're down in there. And they're all sitting on the ground, and I'm training. And they said, I wanted to know if he knew if this chemical protective overgarment suit was good or bad. And he was sleeping. So I threw it at him. "Hey, sir, is this good?" And he goes, "What?" I said, "Is that a good or bad suit?" Well, because I embarrassed him in front of all of the other guys, I got my butt reading for it. But you know what? I didn't care. He needed to pay attention just as much as the rest of the enlisted did, as far as I was concerned.
Exactly.
And another time we trained on a ship. It was a bad suit, by the way. The seal had broken, so it was a bad suit. But
he didn't know.
But then again, another time we were on board ship and we were training. And this seal on board this ship was constantly on the deck plates and would not leave us people alone. And they were scared to death of him. They failed every drill we threw at him. So when we went to do talking and sitting around the table, all of us on the team, he was asking questions, and my warrant officer is hem-humming and just kissing butt to a commanding officer. I'm sorry. And I said, "Can I say something?" And I did. And I got in trouble right then and there by my warrant officer. But you know what? The CEO said, "Leave her alone." We were alone. And we did another drill with him completely away from everybody, and they passed.
Oh.
They were scared to death of him because of repercussions. And he needed to know that. He needed to know that his presence was affecting the performance of his people. Get up on the top decks up there where you belong and stay.
Yep.
Let your people do their work. Let your chiefs do their job. And like I said, I was a very outspoken person. As I was on the CBRD team, I have to tell you what happened. Because I was out to sea so many times and I rode 58 ships in 2 years.
Wow.
In training. Yeah, we were sending them all over to the war zone continuously.
Okay, yep.
Some of them we did more, I did, like the Oliver Hazard Perry, I ended up training it about 4 or 5 times. So that's included with the 58 is like multiple times on ships. I just said how many times I was on ships.
Okay, so this time period you're speaking of, this is during the Gulf War time period. Okay, so that's why you're
right.
You're getting out there on all these ships. I'm going to train you up, get you ready to go.
Right.
Boom, and they're off. Okay.
So it's like I said, the excitement of seeing the world in the Navy at that time. What more could a girl ask for? Right. So I started having to prove to the men about a lot of things. My job on this team was to train. Like I said, the hardest part of being part of this team was being a female on an all-male ship. There was no heads for females. So if I needed to go to the bathroom, I had to get one of my team members to stand by. And it got very humiliating and embarrassing.
Yeah.
And they would say, well, I did it last time. Well, I'm a chief, you do it. And it's like, it was they were just joking, but they didn't realize how humiliating it was. And so that's when the laxatives came out again. I would take them at night because I was sleeping in sick bay. That's where my rack was. And in the morning, before anybody else got up, I would end up having to have a bow. And I would go in a big 5-gallon bucket and dump it down the drain. I did that the whole time I was out to sea with all these men.
Wow.
Except when I got a stateroom or when, But then after a while of doing that, I said, I'm not playing this game anymore. I would just go walk into a male head and say, female on deck. And I would go do my thing. And before I'd even sit down, they would scatter. I just got to where it was just too difficult.
Yeah.
So one time I was in a commanding officer's shower on one of the ships because that's the only shower they had available for me. And this officer walks in and he's talking away to the CO. He thinks it's in the shower. And when I finally said, I think you got the wrong person. Oh, he was gone.
That would have, okay, so I'm not going to lie. That would have been surprising. Just, whoop, did I just hear a woman in the shower?
Yeah, is the CEO with her? So one night we were on also it was one of the Marine base, one of the LPDs. That's a personnel ship that they have.
Okay. We
were on board that, and we were doing some training, and I was down in a stateroom, one of the Marine staterooms, and when you turn out the lights, you can see all these pinholes everywhere in this place. I tell you, when I was out at sea, it was hot pink pants with the shirt to match from here down to my toes and down to my arms. I would not expose anything at any given time because I was the only female, and there's no way I wasn't going to entice anyone.
Yeah.
And I didn't wear makeup when I was out there. I smelled and looked like a sailor just like everybody else. I really tried to keep myself toned down there. But I had an XO come to my stateroom at 11 o'clock at night. And so he said, XO. So, okay, XO, I'm at E6, right?
Yeah.
So I opened the door and I said, yes, sir. Would you like some ice cream? I'm like, what? No, thank you. And I shut the door. Put a chair up against it. Yeah, that was the end of that one. So,
when did they allow women on ships?
1997.
Okay.
In 1996, during the Persian Iraqi freedom, a woman flew over the war zone, and from that point on, they started allowing women and doing more in the military. Yeah, and it used to be that if you got on board ship, as soon as you got pregnant to 3 months, they sent you off, and you never went back again. Mm-hmm. Now it's where a woman gets pregnant and you're on board ship, you go out, you get your leave time and your time with the baby, and you're back on board that same ship. You no longer lose the billet.
Yeah,
because when I was in charge of I missed the LY, here it is, it's coming up. When I was on board the USS LY Spear, which is my next command, when I was on board that, I had 5 women come to me from Treasure Island, San Francisco, where I had done some training, pregnant. And you can't say anything. You've got to be politically correct and everything else. But I'm going to just put this out there too. In accordance with the UCMJ, fornication is illegal. Did you know that? It's written in the UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice. All these women are not married, and they're all having babies. Oh, okay. Well, I couldn't say anything. I'm not allowed to say a word. They were no good to me. As an LPO, I had to find a job that they could do sitting down.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then when they left, they never came back. So I lost 5 billets. 5 people taken out away from me.
Like for good.
Yeah.
You don't get them back.
Yeah. Thank you. And most of these women that had the babies, I found later on when I went to talk to an attorney there, gave their kids up for adoption or gave them to their parents to raise, but collected the money. Mm-hmm. And I'm just being honest. This is what happened when I was there, and I saw this. And why it hurt me more than anything is because I was trying to conceive in my 40s. Mm-hmm. And I was very upset over the fact that I was having such a difficult time, and I would have gladly taken any of their children. So
yeah, I can see that. Like I'm right here.
So and my third husband, when he finally came to me in '91, he showed up back from Cuba.
Back from Cuba,
right? That was October 4th. He got the job with the government, and by October 20th, he was having an affair with a woman in the office. Oh, sorry. And so that was divorce number 3.
Just within a week or 2?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was the reason why he married me, was to get that job in the first place. That's what I found out later. So I bought a house in Chesapeake, Virginia right before. And when we were still married, and when this happened, it's like, wait a minute. I had a house when you met me years ago. I'm going to have a house again, and goodbye. And he was gone and the house was mine. I had him sign it over to me right away. So I continued my career with the mobile training team until July 1993, at which time I married husband number 4. This is the last husband, I promise. So let me go back to October of '92. I had to have major surgery because of a prolapsed bladder. All the up and down and working, being a woman and pulling and having 3 babies. And so they did what's called a tuck. They just kind of like tucked it under. And I was called back to work after 2 weeks. I should have been off 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And because of my job and what I was doing, I was constantly in and out of spaces. And the ladders, they were straight vertical ladders going up. They weren't they were vertical, straight
Angled.
Vertical ladders going up. So you're pulling a lot on the muscle. So within 6 months, it had stopped. Stopped working. In August of '93, I was sent to Senior Enlisted Damage Control School at Treasure Island, San Francisco. This was a 6-week school. I was a newlywed and getting ready to go to a ship, the USS LY Spear. It was a subtender. It got underway 1 week, and the whole time I was there. It doesn't go anywhere because women weren't allowed to go anywhere on ships at the time. So I was also 40 years old. My body and physical readiness was slipping. So I was determined to be the head of my class. I was the only female again. I had to tell the men to stop doing things for me and let me learn. This was difficult because I had a hard time pulling to start up an F-250. So they wanted to do it. They could do it in the first pull. It took me 3. I got it done. And I just had to tell them to stop. We would go out on the weekends and the men would go drinking. I was a designated driver because I refused to ever make that mistake again, going out alone drinking or going out with men in the military drinking. I was never going to do that again.
Yeah.
Each day of our classmates would this guy would pick up 5 of us at the barracks. He had brought his big, double door, big truck, and he had driven it there. Married man, and like I said, I was the only female, and he would pick us up. Well, then this always happens before graduation. 2 days before graduation, and it's a Wednesday night. He comes to my barracks room. I am on the 4th floor, and in order to get to the 4th floor women's ward barracks, you had to pass a guard.
Mm-hmm.
He passed that guard, got into my room. My roommate never locked the door when she went out, and I always got on to her, and I woke up to this man sitting on the edge of my bed.
Wow. That must have been terrifying.
Yeah, I jumped up and said, "What are you doing here? What do you want?" He goes, "I just want to kiss." I said, "I have to piss," and I left. I just jumped out and left the room, went to the bathroom, and sat there going, how did he get past the guard? And the guard was there. And I didn't say anything to the guard. I just went in and said, "You need to get out now." And he left. The next morning, I walked to school in the rain. I told my instructors what was going on, and they said, "Well, we can investigate. But if we do, you're going to be here 2 weeks long."
Yeah, you're not going to graduate on time.
And I dropped it. This is where I think I failed women in the Navy. I dropped too much that happened to me. I did bring this up, and I wanted to. When I was on the AFGL 6, the little dry dock,
Yeah.
this is how I found out that I had been drugged and raped when I was in A school. We had a barge that we lived on, and then we would go down below to do other things. And I went down below to do some work, and we had a dive locker, and the door was cracked open, the watertight door. And I could hear these 3 guys in there laughing, and all of a sudden their voices, I heard I froze. I recognized those voices. And they were literally, this is just unreal that this happened. They were literally talking about when they met in HT school and how they went out and drugged women. And that's when I found out that I was one of those women. So, and I'm saying these things is not to be derogatory towards men. It was what was, women weren't expected to ever serve in the military. They didn't want women in the male's roles. They wanted women to sit behind a desk and look pretty. And that's it. We weren't expected to go out and to challenge and to be able to do a man's job. They weren't expected to do that. So let's get back on the spear. When I got on the spear, the first thing they did, I'm a first-class petty officer, they put me in the first lieutenant's office and had me doing paperwork again.
Trying to make you secretary.
I'm like, this isn't going to happen. After about a year, I said, I can't do this anymore. And then the master chief of the command came up to me, and he saw me walking around on the decks, and he goes, "Norma," he called me Norma. He didn't call me petty officer. He called me Norma. "Norma, I want you to take over the damage control division. What do you think?" I said, "Well, let me think about it." Well, when I said that, there was a chief standing behind me, and I was an E6, and it was a chief female, and she put her foot right up my butt, and she said, "When a master chief asks you to do something, you say, 'Yes, Master Chief.'" And I said, "Yes, Master Chief." So I became in charge of 60 personnel.
Okay.
I knew nothing about damage control except what I had taught. I didn't know about PMS, preventive maintenance system. I didn't know what soundings were. I got the 3rd-class petty officer, great guy. I said, "Show me what you do." I went on him on all his rounds and everything and learned all about soundings and where they were at and what he was doing. I learned where all the secret compartments were on the board ship too. They showed me those things. And then for PMS, I had a 2nd class taking me and showing me all that. The only time I ever got really scared about PMS was when I had to do the CO2 system. We had to wear masks, and we had to go in, and we had to, do preventive maintenance. Well, the 1st-class petty officers, there was 2 of them and a chief that were fired, and that's why I was asked to come up there.
Oh.
Don't know the whole situation, don't want to know. But the master chief did send me a senior chief to be with me, who was one of the greatest leaders I'd ever followed. He helped me through all the trying times, eased my fears, and kept me grounded.
Nice.
And that 3rd class could not pass a test to become a 2nd class. It wasn't that he was illiterate. He knew his job so well. And so what he did is I put him in for meritorious advancement, and he got E5.
Okay.
because if he didn't get E5 soon, he was going to be maxed out on time and they were going to
Yep.
send him away.
Yep.
So he got it. So I was real happy with that. In March of 95, I took the CPO exam, Chief Petty Officer. I missed it. I was passed over. I became so pissed. I was pissed. I just took 60 personnel to be the LPO of. I had aviation warfare. I've done all this stuff. And the first woman doing this and this. And I got passed over. How dare them? I'm seriously. Yeah. So I decided that was the end of it. And I went to gas-free engineering school. I became a gas-free engineer. And then I became an instructor for gas-free engineer. I started working on my surface warfare pin, and I got it within 5 months. I became a damage control team trainer, training personnel with repair lockers. I also worked with the Damage Control Central, calling away fires and flooding drills. I became an assistant to the DCA. I was always the first one on scene on all damage control situations, making decisions to call away general quarters. I was on the ship more than I was at home.
Wow.
And so then in 1996, in March, I took the CPO exam. In April, after the CPO exam, I was removed from the ship. I suffered with migraines, seriously. I'd have 3 or 4 a week. And so they decided that I needed to get more help, and they relieved me from the ship duty. I was devastated. And then I was really upset because what they gave me for transfer evaluation was a 3.2. So I said, this isn't happening. And I went back to the ship and I said, I want to see the commanding officer now. My division officer, and I put a request sheet in, my division officer, CO, and we all sat down. And they said, to get you off the ship so quickly, we had to do this. And I said, it's not going to happen. I'll leave the ship if you want. I don't care. But you're not giving me a 3.2 ever. I've been a 4.0 sailor throughout my whole career. And with what I have done just in this last year, there's no way I'm a 3.2.
Are you talking about like your annual performance rating?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they gave me my 4.0.
Okay.
They gave it to me. So I was
sorry, I keep touching your foot.
That's okay. So anyway, I got it. I was assigned as an instructor for the USS Buttercup. That's a fake ship.
Okay.
It sits in water, and you have to teach people how to do piping and shoring and flooding, and they have to do it under so many minutes or they fail. So I taught that. I taught them how to do shoring. I taught them how to do pipe patching. I was an instructor. I taught them everything. This was at Norfolk, Virginia. So they sent me to instructor school for 2 weeks. Piece of cake. The only thing you do in instructor school, do not put your hands in front of your privates. They call that a fig leaf. You have to be working with your hands the whole time. Oh. Yes. And we all did it when we first started the school.
Everybody just kind of
we'd all stand up there with yeah. So so in July of 96, I found out I was number 6 of 80 damage control CPOs selected.
Wow.
Now the real test and fun begins. I actually started my training July 8th to September 16th. We had 2 months of training. Most people would call it hazing today. I call it training. And I'll tell you one thing. Out of all 37 of us, I would take every one of them to sea with me any day. I trust them with my life. We were a really tight-knit group. I was so busy with training that some of my responsibilities at home and work fell to others. My husband, number 4, that I married in 1993, built my hat box because it had to be certain dimensions and stuff for my hat new cover to go in. He also built a roll top. My box was like this with a handle at this end, and it was a roll top. You roll it up, and there was my chief's charge book inside of it. He built that for me, and I've got a lot of heat on it from the other chiefs. And you know what? I said, delegate. He was a second class. I was a prospective chief. Delegate. I use my resources. So, I also had a Japanese exchange student, and she was an artist. And she painted the chief's anchor on the toes of my shoes, my hat box, my bookcase. I had the greatest time in my life, and I was one of their best team players. Don't ever ask me to eat kimchi again in my life. Just the thought of it makes me sick. There were times during this training that I would go to the shower and cry, praying that I had given it my best and worrying if I was going to survive.
Dang.
It was an experience that I pray that every prospective chief petty officer gets to go through. I hope they never take it away from the ranks.
Yeah.
Never. It was great.
Yeah.
I remember singing the song, I'll tell you this, I'm a little teapot. And I'll tell you this one portion when we had a pig roast. They made us kiss the pig's head. And they told me I didn't kiss it. Well, guess what I did? I kissed that chief and said, "No, I did." I was a player. I had so much fun. After 2 days, let's see, when was it? The day of my pinning ceremony, my parents were present. My dad and my husband pinned me. I was never so proud than I was that day. When it came time for my sponsor to place my cover on my head, that's when I started to lose it. This little girl came up and gave me a Kleenex because tears were streaming down. The emotions were so raw, and I just wanted to let everything spill out. After that day was over, we had 2 days of recuperation. When I went back, I was still teaching and training and all that, but I was doing more gas-free engineering repair locker leaders because that was the higher echelon, and they wanted a chief to teach those.
Okay.
So I taught more to the higher echelons. In November 1997, I had to have another surgery. And this one's really important because this is what was icing on the cake. But my bladder had fallen so bad that they did a bladder sling and did a hysterectomy. The bladder sling is to hold the bladder up. And everything was great, and I was recuperating really well, except they got it too tight. Because of that, I have to catheterize to void, and I still do to this day. Because I was on shore duty, nobody cared about it. It didn't mean anything. And when I got ready to go to sea in 1999, spring of 1999, I was getting ready to pick orders and start going, and all the training and all the stuff I had to go through being a female too. They went through my record and found out that I had a sling and what happened, and told me I couldn't go to sea. It was hard. Yeah, so anyway, I went to the waterfront and I talked to 5 medical departments on different ships, seeing if they would take me. And they were all more worried about running out of medical supplies, because I have the catheters I can only use. You're only supposed to use it once.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could use it more. But so they were afraid of that. They were afraid of getting UTIs, urinary tract infections. They were worried about sepsis. So they told me I couldn't go to sea. So in September of 99, the medical board decided to medically discharge me. And they offered me 50%. And within the next year, I ended up getting 80. But so I said, okay. And he said, pick a date you want to be retired. So I took December 30th, 1999. Normally, if you retire after 20 years, you get the last day of the month. But I took the 30th. I wanted to be different. So I took December 30th of 1999, and I was medically retired after 6 years. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah. So, but December 21st of 1995, my husband and I had officially adopted 2 boys. They were 9 and 12. We took older kids. I couldn't get pregnant, and when I was trying. So, and in 2001, we adopted 2 girls, 6 and 13. And those 2 girls are biracial. That's why I said I'm not prejudiced. I never specified to God what I wanted. I said I want the girls between the ages of 5 and 12. And they said, well, we have to tell you something. And I said, what? They're biracial. I said, I didn't specify a color. I specified an age.
Yep.
And I got, close enough. I completed my bachelor's degree in 2002 and went for my master's in counseling. And I wrote to that was all paid for by the government. And then when I went for my master's, I took a chance and I wrote a book. and sent it to the VA, getting them to pay for my master's. And the day I was supposed to go see and talk to them was I got stuck in a tunnel in Virginia. And I called them and they said, "Oh, that's okay. All you have to do is come up here and sign the paperwork. You've already been approved." So they paid for my master's program, and I got a master's in counseling and theology, and graduating in May 2004, before I turned 51, May 25th. I wanted to have it done by the time I was 50.
Wow.
Then I went to work for a social work place, visiting children in the homes and trying to help the parents and train the parents, and so they could be able to keep their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that for a while, a lot of drama. In 2009, I went to work for Ziders. If you know Ziders in the military in Virginia, it's the company that hires people to train the military in life skills. And we had 103 different subjects that we taught, and I learned 96 of them.
Okay.
The other ones were all in the financial, and I didn't want to deal with them. I received Civilian of the Quarter twice during that time frame I was there. And then while I was there, I ended up getting thyroid cancer and had to have my thyroid removed. But in 2010, June of 2010, my husband and I moved from Virginia to Guffey, Colorado. You know where it's at?
Mm-mm.
It's 9,100 feet was where our property was at. And you got Cripple Creek up here, you got Guffey here, and you got Hartselle over here.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was way out in the mountains. We were able to move into the house in 2013. We acquired 5 horses, 3 Great Pyrenees, 2 lambs, and several feral cats. We had a menagerie. That same year brought us a grandson in 2013. My daughter, that was 6 at the time, was 20. Well, she was 17. She was 17. And in 2015, we adopted the grandson. My daughter now has her son. We gave him back in 20 and she got married. She's got a daughter that's almost 5, and my grandson's 10. And it's just amazing the life he has now with mom and dad. You know, it's wonderful. And grandma gets to be a grandma. So April 2011 brought another major surgery, a complete removal of my large intestine. And the reason I tell you this is how we need to take care of ourselves when we're in the military. If there's something going on, we need to address it and not let it go. Well, I let too many things go. And by doing that and getting addicted to laxatives did not help me. And my enlarged intestine became so enlarged, it's huge, became really floppy, and it kept flipping up over my liver area and the excruciating pain. So I had to have the whole thing removed, and I got an ileostomy, which means I'm connected to my small intestine through a bag.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why I tell you that. So in 2012, I was awarded 100% disability through the VA. Documentation in medical and service records is vital. And so I feel very blessed where I'm at in my career path and what I'm doing today. What happened in the military and the negative things that did happen, there was so much more positive that I miss my career. I felt it was cut short for no fault of my own. The work ethics and values I learned have always stayed with me. I've always maintained a can-do attitude. Sorry. And I have dreams about military life. The phonetic alphabet, I'll never forget. Never. It's ingrained in my mind. I stand at attention and salute my flag.
Yep.
And I cry when I see a flag draped over a coffin. And when I made chief, there was a chief and I, neither one of us were very good at running. And so we held each other up. We would go running on the days that we didn't have to do PT, so we could keep going and keep ourselves going. And so I had the honor of, while active duty, to be a pallbearer for a fellow chief. He passed too soon. He had cancer. He actually came to me before his death and asked me to do so.
Oh.
So that was an honor. So I parachuted September 27th, 21. You want to know what I've done? I parachuted. I keep going on staycations per se. I mean, I'll head out. I'll go to to some waterfalls I want to see or something else, and just take myself and go. I'm retired. I don't have anybody to report to. I have no children. My family's spread out. Um, let's see. I wish here's what you're going to ask me about civilians. I wish that civilians had the same work ethic and respect for their fellow team members as I did. We are all in this job together. We don't undermine, we build up. We push each other to go beyond comfort zones, to experience life. Be happy for those who receive awards. Congratulate. Jealousy has no place in a workforce.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. My journey was incredible. I had a lot of ups and downs, challenging moments, but I persevered. I never gave up on myself. So for anyone considering a military career or just to get an education, remember you will make sacrifices, and so will your families. You have to be dedicated to your career and yourself. And my motto today is, I know I made a difference for many females who came after me.
Yeah.
And I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Take a second. Take a sec.
Give me Kleenex, I ran out.
Oh my goodness. No, keep it running. Keep it running. Keep it running. I want to thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. That's an amazing story. There's a lot of times that, as another veteran and as a male veteran, I hear the, how do I say it? When people overlook a female as a veteran, or somebody addresses the guy with you as the veteran, and you're like, wait a minute, no, hold on, I'm the veteran. Your story of your career is pretty amazing. You did a lot of stuff. I joined the Army as a cook, and I got out of the Army as a cook. You know what I mean? I served a long career too, but I mean, I didn't have all those opportunities to go do all these things like you did. That's pretty rad.
I wanted to be in the military to be a master of something, and instead I was a jack of all trades. Anything they threw my way, I was able to do. And I recently, I went to work May of last year for a company here in Canyon City. It's a mental health facility. And I really wanted to get the job there, so I got it. And I got it behind the scenes as an administrative assistant. And because I wanted behind the scenes, I didn't want to be case coordinator and work with clients. I've already done with the drama in my life. At this age, I just want to. And there wasn't enough work for full time, so I asked to go part time, and I did. And there still wasn't enough work. Because when they wanted something done, I did it. It was done. I didn't sit there and procrastinate. I did what had to be done. And I even went to the other women that worked there and the men, and I would ask them for more work. I say, I can do this, I can do this. So, and one time when the supervisor said, what's going to take you to do this job? It was a new program. And I said, I'm a tactical person. I need hands-on. And she goes, okay. She came right over and she goes, I'll give you hands-on. She goes, why have you been fighting this? You know what you're doing. I said, I didn't want to do it. And because I don't have to work, I didn't want to do it. So I just felt I could do that. But I learned it. I learned it too well that I ended up getting all of that stuff for implementation into that program. And then I had to have another surgery in May to remove one ileostomy over to the other to repair a hernia that was the size of a grapefruit.
Wow.
And 9 days in the hospital. And so I took the time off, had the whole month of June off, and then went back to work in July, working from home. And we had Wednesdays were our days to all of us got together and had team meeting. They were changing so much. Wednesday the 7th, I think it was, of July, I said, accept this this letter as my resignation in 2 weeks' notice. And I sent it to him. I was done. It got to be no fun.
Yeah.
And my health was more important to me than working. But I love that job.
You put work in front of your health a lot throughout your career.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I have. But you know, it's like now it's me, and I'm taking care of me, and I have fun. I'm getting ready to go see grandkids in
Good.
Nevada, and then I've got grandkids. Got a new grandson. He's a little over a year in Virginia. I got kids in Hawaii. I'm going to Hawaii next June to see my grandbabies.
How cool.
My grandson that's 10. Yeah.
How cool. What a life. You jumped out of planes. I mean, you did all kinds of cool stuff. I've jumped out of planes too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I did it with, what did they say when you do a tandem?
Yep, a tandem jump.
I did a tandem jump. And the guy said, "Are you ready?" He said, "You have no fear, do you?" I said, "You don't know what I have done in my career. I have no
Exactly.
fear." So, yeah. So,
Exactly.
anyway.
Exactly. So let's wrap this up a little bit. There's something that you mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation that seems like it's really important after having heard your story. You mentioned the young Navy personnel that you saw with the long hair and
That was Air Force, sorry. Wasn't
oh, they
Navy.
were Air Force.
They were Air Force.
They were Air Force. But if it weren't for women like you and what you went through, they wouldn't be allowed that today.
So no, you know, our world is changing every day. Every day. I mean, gays and lesbians weren't allowed to talk about it while they were in the military, and now it's acceptable. I don't have anything against that. I just have to say it. No more hiding. No more hiding of who we are and what we are or what we want to be. In fact, my friend Scott, I didn't know. I knew him since 1989. It was 2003 before I knew he was gay.
Oh.
He kept it a big secret for years. And I said, no wonder he was such a great friend, you know, and no wonder he's such a great friend today. And his partner, they've been together like 27 years, I think. And his partner is just the most awesome person. I love both of them. They're very dear friends of mine.
Yeah.
And that's one of the few names I've given. And I tried not to give names. I tried not to give, because I can't go back and fix what happened. I can only go forward and take care of myself.
Yeah.
And I just want any woman who goes into the military to realize, don't ever keep it a secret if anything happens to you. Take the time to do something about it, because if you don't, it's going to happen to someone else. And I think that's the only part that I chose, not failed, but I chose not to say anything. And I think that was right, wasn't right by women in the military. That's the only thing. But other than that, I'm telling you, my husband was telling me, he goes, "Yeah, you had all the fun in the military." And yeah, I did. I was gone all the time going out to sea, and I loved it. I just love my military career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe it. I believe it.
When I made Sheep, it was just the icing on the cake, and I made it in 11 and a half years. Yeah. So, and that's hard to do.
Yep.
And like I said, I hope that never goes away. I hope they still have the training. The training is so important. You know.
Yeah.
I loved it when my women, enlisted women, wore covers, and they were like little boats, ugly. And before we got the big hat, and now they wear a different hat. But we had to take that cover and put it over on this. It was a simulation at the fire department, the military fire department in Norfolk. And we had to put our cover on top of this helicopter that they actually light up and burn it, and you have to put the fire out. That's how they teach you the firefighting. But we had to put it over there, and each of us had a eulogy that we had to read while they burned our covers. Because that's a part of our life that was never going to come back.
It wasn't going to come back to that.
Right, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So amazing.
That's cool.
You know, those are some of the stuff I can tell you. The rest of it's secret.
Okay, fair enough.
Secret code.
Fair enough. So I'm going to have to become a friend of yours and spend some time hanging out with you to get to hear those other stories.
I may write it in the book.
Okay.
Because it doesn't happen anymore.
Okay.
And I want people to realize what they've lost and what they don't realize that, you know, it sounds like it was a lot. Like I said, kimchi, when it came time for actual initiation night on the 15th, well, actually 16th at midnight, I told him, I said, I've eaten for you for 6 weeks. I'm not going to eat another thing during an issue. And I refused to eat anything they put my way. Well, then you can wear it. I wore kimchi. I wore sardines. I wore all that smell. I didn't think it was ever going to come off. Yeah. I have never heard of kimchi in my life until they told me I had to buy it.
It's good times.
It was.
Good times.
It is, but I mean, it's like my office mate at my former job, she was eating kimchi one day in the office. I said, "What are you eating?"
Oh my gosh.
I just grabbed the bucket. I was so ready to puke. I was just like, ah. It's things like that that you remember. So,
Yep.
But again, I mean, we're laughing about this.
Yep.
We're laughing about it because there were so many good times. So many good times. And
Yep.
to be able to say I was the first, I did this, I persevered, I passed, I challenged myself, I pushed myself.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and where's it at? I was going to show it. This is how sexy I was.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that was me as a first class. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I got all sorts of awards. And, you know,
Yep.
good conduct medals, meritorious accommodation medals. I don't know. I just had 3 or 4 rows of them.
You just got them all.
Yeah, and I didn't. They weren't that important. Anything that we got as a command, it wasn't me that did it. It was my people and me.
Yep.
We all did it together.
Yep.
Nobody did it individually. So yeah, and my learning, you know, becoming civilian of the quarter when I was teaching for the military, you know, I taught all this, but you know, these commands asked me to come back, so it was them too.
Yep.
They asked me to come back to teach these people. So yeah.
This was awesome. I really want to thank you. I really enjoyed what was, in my opinion, kind of cool because you did such a great job of preparing for this. All I had to do was just listen.
Well, I wasn't sure.
So
I wasn't sure what I should just wait and have you ask me the questions and then do it. And I thought, let me just do everything and try to do it in chronological order and just go through it and get through it.
You got it. That worked.
But the reason I wanted to spend more time on boot camp in the beginning was to show how I was set up from day one, that these things were going to happen to me in real life. And, you know, and I have to look back. Yes, it was bullies. I mean, there were bullies.
Yeah.
And it was mean, some of the stuff they did. But how was I to know what the rest of my career was going to be? Only to me, God knows.
Yeah.
All that stuff I went through prepared me for that career, that specific career and timeline.
Yep.
Had I not gone through it, I would have probably never made it through those timelines.
Dang.
I know.
Dang.
So you have to look at the good. You have to look and see what's positive and what came of all this. And, you know, I was remembering names of people. And I'm like, I remember their names. Gosh. And to say the least, like I said, I went in at 30. By 46, 47, I was out of the military. I am 70 years old now. And no more drama. Just having fun with what I have left.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
So.
Right on.
Okay.
Well, we can call that the interview. We're wrapped up. What we'll do from this point is we'll go ahead and